Sherry always looked forward to the weekends. Her childlike heart literally jumped out of her chest in anticipation of the moment when their group's nanny, Becky, would take her by the hand and lead her through the city to her home. For girls who had no families and had spent their entire lives in an orphanage, such a simple stroll seemed like a real magical journey. Sherry examined passers-by, city buildings, large buses, cars, and even bicycles with wide eyes. People around them hurried about their business, unaware of how fascinating the world could seem to orphan girls. At Becky's home, delicious homemade food awaited her, and Becky's daughter, Judy. The girls were of the same age and got along very well. Becky had thought many times about adopting Sherry into her family but had never mustered the courage. It was already challenging without a husband or relatives, and raising a child seemed almost impossible. Becky gently held the warm hand of the woman Sherry considered almost like a mother and asked, "Is that gray cat we saw last time still living near our house? I've been thinking about him all week. He's so beautiful. I really want to pet him." Becky smiled and replied, "Of course, he's still there. That troublemaker always finds someone to play with. Yesterday, he was chasing pigeons. The neighbor who keeps the dovecot scolded him harshly, but he didn't get offended. Everyone loves that cat in our neighborhood. And you lost a button today. If you want, I can sew it back on for you." Sherry replied hopefully, "Yes, I want to learn to do it myself, but I don't know how yet. We'll definitely sew it on, and maybe even make a dress for my doll. Tomorrow morning, Judy and I will work on it." Becky sighed and asked, "Sure, tomorrow morning, we'll do it together. How's Judy doing? Is she no longer sick?" Sherry remembered that her Aunt Lena hadn't taken her for a visit last weekend because her daughter had a sore throat. "She's not sick. Don't worry. She's already feeling better. Judy is running around the house like a cat after pigeons." For some reason, Sherry felt so light and cheerful, and while holding Becky's hand, she attempted a little jump. Becky noticed her good mood and said, "You're so cheerful today." "In a great mood." Sherry joyfully nodded. Yes, I'm having a wonderful day." When they met, the girls embraced as if they were the closest of friends, then settled in a corner to share their thoughts with each other. Sherry cautiously watched them surreptitiously and smiled. Judy loved how her friends came up with various pranks. At home, of course, they didn't allow themselves to be too mischievous, but when they went out to the yard, they immediately became great organizers of various games. The important thing was that in these matters, Becky was always in charge, not Sherry from her daycare. Judy and Sherry had been friends since childhood and, after finishing school, decided to attend the same college. Sherry continued to occasionally visit Judy and her mother, but as a grown-up, she tried not to overuse the hospitality of kind people. They provided her with a room in the dormitory, and now Sherry could invite Judy to visit her. This happened one sunny spring day. The girls were in their 4th year of college and met to share exciting news they had discovered. Judy exclaimed with fiery eyes, "Can you imagine? I'm in love." Sherry was happy for her friend and said, "A great guy named Max. By the way, he's in love with me too. Maybe I'll marry him soon." Judy smiled and replied, "I almost wanted to tell you the same thing. I'm in a relationship with a guy named Robert." The news delighted Judy, and she continued, "What if we both get married at the same time? We could have our weddings on the same day, and then our children will be friends, just like us." Sherry smiled and responded, "You're such a dreamer. I'm not taking things that seriously with Robert right now. We're just dating. But you seem to have convinced me to start planning for marriage." Other girls began sharing their dreams about the future, and in each other, they saw their future selves. 6 months later, Max proposed to Judy, but by that time, Sherry and Robert had already broken up. Robert was moving to the capital, and Sherry told her friend, "He's leaving, and I thought he might invite me to go with him. But Robert made it clear that he has no plans to marry me. His mother has long hinted that she dreams of him finding a girl from a wealthy family and building a successful business." Judy began to worry and said, "Don't worry, Sherry, I have plans for you. We just need to decide on a dress and get a stamp in your passport. Then let me know, and I'll help you find a husband." Sherry declared her confidence in her friend. Judy hugged Sherry and said, "Petty, unworthy people. I'll get married and find a husband for you. All that's left is to decide on a dress and get a stamp in your passport. Then we'll be happy together. It will be wonderful." "Indeed," agreed Sherry, nodding. What if Robert and Max became friends? What would we do then as families? Everything that happens is for the best. Judy, as always, you're making grand plans and devising strategies. Suddenly, Sherry felt a smile through her tears. Sherry decided and said, let's celebrate your wedding and focus on my personal life. Consider it, you've convinced me. Sherry couldn't stay sad for long, especially when Judy was around. Her energy seemed to radiate in waves, captivating everyone around her. Sherry decided not to be sad and to help Judy prepare for her wedding. The girls raided wedding salons, spending hours discussing which hairstyle to choose and what jewelry would look best on Judy on her most important day. Everything was coming together perfectly, and they happily spent their time. However, what happened next was unexpected. 3 days before the wedding, Judy disappeared without a trace. In the morning, Becky couldn't reach her, trying to find out where she had spent the night. Max thought she had returned to her mother, and Judy's mother believed she had stayed the night at her groom's. However, by morning, it became clear that she was not in either place. Searches began soon after. Max and Becky scoured the entire city, but there was no trace of Judy. In a week of searching, all they found was a silk scarf Judy had worn that night, stained with blood. The scarf was found near a bus stop by a grassy canal. It became evident that the scarf's owner hadn't survived. Becky wept, and everyone around tried to comfort her. Sherry was with the woman who had become her second mother in this difficult moment. They were each other's support, and Sherry helped the grieving mother not to lose her mind. Becky continued searching and didn't let the police forget about her daughter. However, over time, no new information about the missing girl emerged. The police couldn't declare her dead since her body was not found, but they still couldn't find her. Becky asked Sherry, have you seen Max lately? Maybe he remembers something about our friend's fiancé. Sherry thought for a moment and replied, Max has been doing really poorly lately. As long as there was still hope that they'd find Judy. Max raised his heavy gaze to meet Sherry's, his face haggard, his eyes pale and haunting. He whispered, it's you. Sherry tried to lift his spirits. Yes, it's me. Do you remember me? We and Becky are going through this together. Are you okay? Max replied slowly, his voice indifferent. I'm fine, if you don't count the fact that I want to die because of my helplessness and hopelessness. Sherry couldn't hide her emotions and said tearfully, are you really giving up? You don't believe we can find Judy anymore? Do you hear yourself? Sherry asked, deeply concerned. Max sadly stated, how can I not give up in a situation like this? It's been so long, and there are no leads. Sherry responded, Max, don't talk like that. But Max said, don't talk like that. Sherry, do you also no longer believe we can find Judy? Do you hear yourself? How can I not give up in a situation like this? It's been so long, and there are no leads. Sherry began to cry, and Max said, I cursed the moment I stayed on that damn couch and didn't go to meet her. Why was I so careless? Why didn't I sense that something could happen to her? I deserve to die. Sherry tried to comfort him again, but her words lacked power. She realized that she, too, had lost faith and deep down had come to terms with Judy's absence. Even though they were practically strangers to each other, sitting on the ash-covered, alcohol-soaked couch, they cried and understood each other better than anyone else. Max answered Sherry's questions about when he last ate and how he ended up in this state. He sadly admitted that he hadn't been able to remember when he last went to work or ventured outside. Everything around him seemed indifferent, and he had sunk into hopelessness. Sherry was persistent and decided not to leave him in this state. She suggested making chicken broth for him and trying to bring him back to life, reminding him that Judy's mother was also going through a very difficult time. Max agreed to this, although he held little hope. Sherry spent the night at his place, helping and supporting him. They didn't sleep, reminiscing about Judy and sharing memories of her. The next morning, Sherry cleaned up the apartment and insisted that they go outside for some fresh air. They headed to a nearby park with a cute bench under a large tree. Sherry addressed Max as if he were Judy's fiancé, trying to help him accept the bitter truth of Judy's disappearance. Sherry and Max slowly moved towards acceptance of their loss and spent time together, reminiscing about Judy and visiting the places she loved. Max and Sherry remembered those simple and sweet moments from their lives, all connected by their shared love for the dear girl, Judy. Max returned to work, and although their emotional wounds, though not fully healed, became less painful, The echoes of their terrible loss remained, but time slowly mended their hearts. They didn't forget about Becky, but they learned to live without Judy, filling their lives with routine and simple joys. One day, Sherry gathered her courage and spoke to Becky. "Becky, I have to tell you something. I don't know if you'll understand me or forgive me, but Max and I have decided to get married. It's not passion or intense love. We just realized that no one else in this world will understand us the way we understand each other. Judy brought us together, and we spent so much time comforting each other that at some point, we realized we want to be together. Please forgive us, Becky. We will always remember your daughter and love her, and if we have a daughter, we'll name her Judy, and you'll have a little Judy again. Please forgive and bless us." Becky hugged Sherry, crying, "My girl, how can I be angry with you? You've endured so much sorrow. I know you practically brought Max back from the dead. I saw him dying with my own eyes. All this year, I prayed for some glimmer of hope. And if God can't bring my Judy back, at least let there be a drop of happiness for you. I want you to have children, and if you allow me, I'd gladly be their grandmother." Max and Sherry didn't have a big wedding. They quietly got married and started living together. Soon, they had a son, whom they named after his father. And a few years later, a girl named Judy, as promised by Becky. Little Judy turned out to be much like the part that got her name. Little Judy was a lively and cheerful girl, and she enjoyed playing with her brother. Little Judy kept him on his toes, just like Becky and her Judy did. The young parents listened to Becky's stories with smiles on their faces. Warm and loving relationships filled their family, and the children grew up surrounded by love and care. Their parents, who had lost Judy, learned to cherish life and each day lived. Years passed, and Max and Sherry raised their children, never leaving Becky without their help and support. The woman had a heavy heart, but she held on, believing her Judy was alive and would be found. And it happened. Many years after her mysterious disappearance, Judy was found. Volunteers working to free abducted girls abroad informed Becky that during the latest legal proceedings against the kidnappers, a strange story came to light. According to the testimony of one of the prosecution witnesses, almost a decade ago, there was a girl in their abduction group named Tatiana, but it turned out her real name was Judy. Judy had been crying all this time, talking about her groom waiting for her at home and their upcoming wedding. The night before they were sent to a brothel, she tried to escape but was caught and severely punished by one of the kidnappers. She couldn't be used for the work they had taken her for anymore. Judy was severely battered, delirious most of the time, not recognizing anyone around her, with head and leg injuries. One night before their departure across the border, one of the male kidnappers disappeared briefly. Then he decided to get rid of Judy and left her somewhere in the vicinity. The police began searching for Judy's remains, but they couldn't find them. Instead, in one of the regions where affluent people had settled in the 1970s, Judy was found alive. This woman's name was Rada, and she was in critical condition. She was found almost dead, and the police were connected to the crime. However, a local wealthy man who knew about the police investigation chose not to report the discovery. They helped the girl recover, and she survived. However, she didn't remember how she got there, who she was, or even her name. 2 years later, the girl given the name Rada married a local man named Sergei, who had found her. Sergei was the son of a local blacksmith and a Russian woman. Rada managed to obtain documents, and now she had 3 children, 2 boys and a daughter. She still didn't remember anything about her previous life, but when investigators examined the missing persons records, it turned out that a similar girl named Judy had been sought there 10 years ago. "Yes, that's my Judy." Becky recognized her daughter when looking at the photograph. "Where is she? I want to see her. She might be far away, but I don't care. I'll go." "This woman doesn't remember her past or you," they assured Becky. Nevertheless, she agreed to visit, as the doctors believed that seeing familiar faces and places might jog her memory. Becky found it hard not to share this news with Sherry, but she decided they needed to meet Rada first and make sure the woman with the gold earrings and rings and rich jewelry was truly her daughter. Sherry was concerned, stopping by before work to check on her mother. "Are you feeling well? Why are your hands trembling? Did you have that dream again?" Sherry asked. "Yes, my dear, I had that dream, but don't worry, you know it's a good dream, and I'm sure everything will be fine," Becky replied, comforting her daughter. Sherry knew that ever since Judy's disappearance, her mother had been having a dream in which she insisted her daughter was alive and they would be reunited. But she couldn't help but wonder when that would happen. Now Becky realized that her dreams were a metaphor for Judy's memory. Becky knew she shouldn't talk about this. She was afraid that such hope might fade. Comforting Sherry, she said, "Go on, my dear. Don't worry about me. You might be late." Sherry brushed it off, but hope remained in Becky's heart. In the evening, Max called, and Sherry was delighted. She kissed the woman on the cheek and placed the medications in front of her. Unaware of anything, Sherry rushed to work. This Saturday morning started as usual. Sherry woke up early while the children were still asleep, and Max was away on a business trip. The family expected his return closer to the evening. After her morning run in the empty park, Sherry hurried to the kitchen. "I'll prepare breakfast quickly, and then something delicious for the children and Max. He loves to eat more. What else should I make? My signature dish and, of course, a cake. But the cake, with Judy, she won't forgive me if I make it myself." Suddenly, there was a faint knock on the door. Sherry guessed that it might be a family member, but she couldn't determine who exactly. Sherry thought, the person who knows that everyone is still asleep today. Saturday is a day off. But who? Max? But it's still 10 hours until his arrival. Maybe he decided to surprise and came early. But with what? Could it be Becky? Sherry looked through the peephole of the door. Perhaps she decided to help me prepare dinner. She's persistent. Great. Upon opening the door, Sherry was surprised. Standing before her was a woman whose eyes were extremely familiar. In the next moment, forgetting about the sleeping children, Sherry screamed in horror. "Judy, is that you?" Then she looked at the woman next to Becky's mother and froze. "Oh, I must have been mistaken. I'm sorry," Sherry said, as if apologizing for her scream. "Come in, please. Have a seat." She invited the guest, and they entered the living room. And at that moment, with joyful cries, the children woke up and ran to Becky. "We didn't expect you so early, but we're still so happy," little Judy said cheerfully. "Don't you want to say hello to Judy?" Becky's voice chimed in. "Sherry, my dear friend, introduce me to your little ones," Judy's voice said, who had disappeared 10 years ago. Yes, it was Judy who arrived at her mother's the night before. Seeing the familiar walls, she suddenly remembered everything, as the doctors had predicted. The incredible power of human memory, Sherry thought, not letting go of Judy from her embrace. They talked all night, joyfully reunited. There was so much to tell each other. Becky looked through photos and videos from Judy's wedding, of their 3 grandchildren, how they each came into the world, took their first steps, and saw the oldest one off to his first grade. "Judy, these are Max's children," Sherry confessed. "I know everything. Mom told me everything. I have a wonderful family too, a husband and 3 children." Sherry breathed a sigh of relief. "You're not drawing cats on the neighboring doors anymore, are you?" "I've gained some weight, and in case I need to run away, I won't make it. Now my kids take care of that. They misbehave almost every day and get in trouble with the neighbors." "By the way, how old are your kids, 8 and 6? Sherry asked. "Yes," Judy replied. Becky looked at her grandchildren, whom she had just met. They reminisced about their carefree adventures, dressed up in festive attire, and reveled in this happiness. Joy had come to Becky's home at a time when almost no one believed it would. She couldn't even imagine that happiness would multiply many times over in the form of her grandchildren, whom Becky had longed to see and embrace. Can there be a happier person? She thought, watching her beloved girls, who, along with Judy, recalled their happy moments together.